What happens when the one person holding your most valuable partnership together is the one you fire first? She wasn't flashy. She didn't talk the loudest. She didn't carry a title that turned heads in meetings. But for over a decade, Elena Foster was the quiet force behind one of the most successful international relationships her company had ever built. Fluent in Mandarin, steeped in cultural nuance, and trusted by leaders across the globe not because of where she sat in the org chart, but because of how she showed up when it mattered. Until one day, a 29-year-old with a shiny degree and shinier shoes walked into the building, armed with buzzwords, ego, and a last name that opened doors. He didn't know who she was. Worse, he didn't care. And by the time he realized what he'd lost, the damage was already spreading. So here's the question. What do you do when you've been erased by someone who thinks power lives in titles? But you're the only one who holds the trust. This isn't a story of revenge, it's a story of quiet power, of competence, of the storm that brews behind stillness, and how one woman's calm, calculated return shifted an entire empire not with noise, but with undeniable truth. If stories like this speak to you about dignity, work, identity, and quiet strength, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just business, it's personal. Now, let's begin. There was a certain kind of silence that fell over the office that Monday morning, stiff, anticipatory, and uncomfortable. You could almost hear the shift in temperature when he walked in. Chase Whitman, tailored suit, shoes too polished to trust, and a smirk that spoke fluent entitlement. He didn't shake hands. He didn't ask names. He didn't even glance toward the team he was meant to lead. Instead, he walked straight through the glass corridor like a camera was watching, like he'd been rehearsing that entrance in his head for years. "He looks young," someone whispered behind the coffee machine. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. You learn to recognize the scent of upheaval long before the announcement hits your inbox. And Chase. He smelled like disruption packaged in expensive cologne. At 29, with a fresh MBA from somewhere glossy and expensive, Chase had just been named Vice President of Strategic Global Development at Valenbridge Solutions, the same company I had poured over a decade of my life into. He also happened to be the CEO's only son. I sat quietly in my modest corner office, earned, not inherited. My title was Unassuming Regional Director of International Relations East Asia. What it didn't say on the door was that I'd spent 8 years living out of suitcases, decoding cultures, learning how to bow just the right degree in Kyoto, and how not to offend during a tea pour in Suzhou. What it didn't say was that the most valuable contract Valenbridge had, our multi-million-dollar partnership with Liang Group in Shanghai, had been built on 1,000 shared meals and precisely 0 buzzwords. But to Chase, I was just one of the legacy hires. That's what he called us. Those who'd been with the company before its rebrand, before the mission statements became posters, before the perks replaced purpose. He held his first executive meeting that morning without inviting half the people who mattered, including me. I watched through the glass wall as he circled the table, gesturing with one hand, cappuccino in the other, his words muffled but his tone unmistakable. "We need fresh thinking," I heard him say through the frosted door. "Some of these departments are stuck in the past." Someone laughed, a little too loud. Chase smiled. He didn't know he was talking about the people who had saved this company more times than he'd saved a Word document. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the framed photo on my shelf. It was from 3 years ago, standing beside Mr. Liang, founder and chairman of Liang Group. After finalizing the new green energy partnership, he was smiling, a rare thing for him. He once told me, "In our culture, trust comes before paper. Paper is just the signature of the heart." No one else at Valenbridge had ever met him in person, but Chase didn't know that. Later that afternoon, the first signs of his fresh thinking arrived in the form of a vague internal memo titled Realignment Vision 2.0. It used words like synergy and streamlining, the kind that always meant someone was about to lose their job. The office buzzed with nervous energy. People avoided eye contact, quietly forwarding the email to each other as if decoding a secret message. I didn't react, not externally. You don't survive 12 years in international partnerships without learning the value of stillness. Panic is loud, but presence, that's quiet power. Still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't uneasy. Chase hadn't spoken a word to me since arriving. No introduction, no briefing, no interest. And Friday was the quarterly video call with Mr. Liang, the one I'd been prepping for over the past month, the one Chase didn't even have on his radar. By Tuesday, the layoffs began. The first was subtle Janice from supply chain, 22 years with the company, escorted out with a box and no announcement. By noon, people were whispering names like prayers. By 3:00 p.m., I saw Carlos from data analytics walking out, eyes glazed, badge already deactivated. No one looked surprised, only scared. That night, I walked home through the city with my phone buzzing in my pocket. Messages from former colleagues. Did you hear, is your team safe? They're saying Chase wants to cut all mid-level managers? I stopped responding. I poured myself a glass of wine, turned off the lights, and sat in the quiet. I didn't fear being let go. I feared being underestimated. The thing about men like Chase is that they mistake quiet competence for irrelevance. They think relationships are just contacts, that trust is a checkbox, that fluency is Google Translate and diplomacy is a bullet point agenda. They don't know that one mistimed pause, one wrong gesture, one joke that doesn't translate it can end a deal you spent years building. And Chase. He was walking into Friday's call thinking it was just another Zoom meeting. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't sharpen knives. I didn't tell anyone what I was thinking. I just waited. Because some storms don't arrive with thunder. Some storms begin with the sound of shoes that are too shiny for the road ahead. The meeting invite came on Wednesday afternoon, no subject line. Just a timestamp of 00 p.m. and two attendees, Chase Whitman and HR. I stared at the screen for a moment, then clicked accept. No heartbeat skipped, no surge of anger. Just the quiet confirmation of something I already knew. At 3:58, I walked to the executive floor. The hallway was quieter than usual. People weren't making eye contact, not in the way they avoid you, but in the way they avoid knowing what might happen to them next. Fear has a peculiar smell. It's somewhere between antiseptic and coffee gone cold. I entered the room at exactly 4:00. Chase was already there, leaning back like a guest on a morning show, legs crossed, fingers tapping lightly on the table. The HR rep beside him was someone I had mentored 3 years ago, Lauren Vickers, kind, soft-spoken, now looking at the floor like she was reading her exit line from it. "Elena," Chase said without standing. "Thanks for coming in. This won't take long." I gave a small nod and took the seat across from him. No pleasantries, no eye contact from Lauren. Just that practiced, slightly rehearsed tone people use when they're reading from a playbook titled How to Terminate Without Getting Sued. "We've been reviewing our structure," Chase began, "realigning resources for maximum efficiency. And we've concluded that, while your contributions have been solid, the company is moving in a direction that requires different kinds of leadership." He used the word solid like it was a curse. More agility. More innovation, he added, as if it'd been sitting still for the past 12 years instead of flying across oceans and negotiating contracts through cultural minefields. I looked at Lauren, who was still avoiding my eyes. I remember teaching her how to manage cross-cultural tension during a negotiation workshop in our Tokyo office. She had asked if being quiet meant being passive in Japanese business. I told her, silence can be a form of control. Apparently, she remembered. She stayed silent now. Chase smiled a small, smug twitch. "We need people smarter than you." I folded my hands in my lap. "Good luck on Friday." That made him blink. "What's Friday?" he asked, the first crack in his script. "Your quarterly with Mr. Liang," I replied, calmly. "It's on your calendar. You're leading it now." A pause. "Oh," he said, brushing the thought away. "Well, manage. We're a modern company. I'm sure we can figure it out." "Of course," I said with a small nod, rising to leave. I didn't touch the envelope he slid across the table. Severance, most likely. Legalese. Closure stamped in HR's font of choice. Back at my desk, I began packing, not hurried, not bitter. One mug, two notebooks, a framed photo of my team in Seoul, and a small jade sculpture Mr. Liang had once given me as a gesture of respect. A few heads turned, no one spoke. Danielle from accounting mouthed, so sorry as I passed. I smiled gently in return. No speeches, no farewell emails. I just walked out of the building the way I'd lived in it, quietly, intentionally. That night, I sat on the floor of my living room with a cup of chamomile tea and the city humming below my window. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like clarity, like a fog lifting and revealing something I hadn't looked at closely in a while. I thought about why it didn't hurt. Maybe because I knew the difference between work and worth. Maybe because I'd watched too many people wrap their identities in job titles, only to unravel when the title disappeared. I hadn't been perfect at Valenbridge. I'd made mistakes, missed birthdays, sacrificed vacations for last-minute flights. But what I built, that was real. And it couldn't be deleted by a man who didn't know how to pronounce the name of our biggest client. The next morning, I woke early out of habit. No alarm, just muscle memory. I brewed jasmine tea not because I needed it, but because it reminded me of the way Mr. Liang always served it, precise to the second. Respect, he used to say in Mandarin, is shown in preparation, not performance. By mid-morning, the texts started trickling in. Did they really let you go? I don't understand. You handled all of Asia. Is he insane? I responded to none of them. I wasn't ready to speak, not yet. There's something about silence that unsettles people more than rage. Rage is predictable. But silence holds power, and on Friday that power would speak. Friday arrived like a whisper before a storm. At Valenbridge's headquarters, the air was unnaturally still, like the building itself sensed what was coming. Laughter was replaced by cautious glances. The usual morning rhythm coffee orders, hallway greetings, keyboard taps felt muted. Even the elevator seemed to move slower, as if reluctant to carry anyone to the 17th floor. I wasn't there. Not officially. I was at home, in my apartment across the city, a blanket over my lap and my laptop open. The kettle had just clicked off. Outside, the sky was overcast, and the streets shimmered from the night's rain. It was the kind of morning that invited introspection and, apparently, unraveling. My inbox chimed. The first message was from a junior associate I barely knew. He's doing the call solo, no translator, no prep, just buzzwords and a slide deck. Wasn't this your account? Yes, it was. For almost 8 years, the Liang Group partnership wasn't just a win. It was a tapestry, woven from formal dinners, missteps learned from mid-autumn gifts, and conversations that happened between lines of contracts. I had learned to read silence in Mandarin, to offer tea before small talk, to never speak over Mr. Liang's senior advisors even when I disagreed. Chase had learned PowerPoint, 10:10 a.m. Sharp. The meeting began. I wasn't watching it, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly how it would go. I could picture the room glass walls, a too-bright screen, Chase pacing like a keynote speaker. He likely opened with a grin, arms wide, the kind of energy that works in boardrooms when no one speaks your language. Across the world, Mr. Liang and his team logged on punctual, serious, unmoved by showmanship. The same Mr. Liang who once told me, "The first minute of a meeting reveals whether a partnership will last 10 years or 10 days." Back in the office, a young intern tried to keep up. She didn't speak Mandarin, Chase didn't either. There was no interpreter. The senior liaison I'd trained had been reassigned in the restructuring. I heard later what happened through fragmented Slack messages and anxious emails. He called them the Jinlong Corporation. They corrected that 5 years ago. He made a joke about fortune cookies. No one laughed. They just went silent. 15 minutes in, and nothing meaningful had been communicated. The slide deck buzzed with words like global synergy, scalable optimization, and future forward value, but in Mandarin, they don't translate cleanly. Worse, they sound hollow. Mr. Liang said something, slowly, deliberately. No one responded. The intern panicked. Chase smiled blankly. And then, with no warning, Mr. Liang stood up. Not angrily, not abruptly, just decisively. He faced the camera, spoke one final sentence in Mandarin, then the screen went black. No goodbye, no apology, no second chance, just silence, but it wasn't empty. It echoed across the 17th floor. The meeting room stayed still. Some stared at the monitor. Some looked at Chase, waiting for him to explain what had just happened. He couldn't. He sat there, hands idle, lips pressed into a thin, uncertain line. 10:45 a.m. The room emptied without instruction. The intern slipped out first. Then the junior managers. No one said anything. Silence, again. 11:02 a.m. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. 11:05 a.m. A text came through. Hey Elena, can we talk? Something weird happened with the Liang call. Weird, I thought, sipping my tea slowly. That's one word for it. I didn't reply. He didn't understand. Not yet. This wasn't about a failed video call. This was about what that silence meant, what it cost. By evening, I had received 4 more texts. The tone shifted. The last one was almost pleading. Please. Just help me fix this. I didn't realize I closed the laptop, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. You see, Chase had fired me like a line item in a budget, but what he removed wasn't a title. It was a relationship, a bridge, and in global partnerships, bridges are everything. I thought about Mr. Liang, about the last time we met in person. He had handed me a small red box with a green tea tin inside. Not a gift of value, but of gesture. He'd said, we don't do business with paper. We do business with people who understand. Chase hadn't understood. That weekend, rumors swirled. Whispers turned to phone calls, and phone calls turned into boardroom questions. Why was there no interpreter? Why was Elena let go without transition? Is this how we treat our longest-standing client? I received a voicemail from Valenbridge's HR director, then another from the CEO's assistant. I didn't return them. Not out of spite, out of strategy. Because sometimes silence isn't absence, it's architecture. And Chase was beginning to feel the walls lean. On Monday morning, I woke to 3 missed calls and an email flagged as urgent. The subject line read, Consultancy Opportunity Immediate Engagement. The sender, Chase Whitman. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight warming the worn wood, and slowly peeled an orange, methodical, deliberate. I had nowhere to be, but I felt no emptiness. There's something strange about watching the fallout from a safe distance, like watching a house you once lived in slowly realize you were the one keeping the roof intact. When I finally read the email, it was as expected, professional, desperate, and oddly vague. They were exploring a short-term advisory role and would greatly value my experience in facilitating international partnerships. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a lifeline disguised as a contract. I sat back and let the silence stretch. Around noon, another message arrived. This time from someone I respected. Marion Green, the CFO. Elena is drowning. If you're going to step in, make sure you're holding the rope, not the raft. That made me smile. By Tuesday morning, I walked back through Valenbridge's tall glass doors not as an employee, not as a subordinate. I was a consultant now, a free agent with no title, no office, no illusions. Chase met me in the lobby. He tried to act casual, like we were 2 colleagues reconnecting after a conference. Elena, he said, and offering a too wide smile. Glad you're here. I looked at him, carefully. His eyes were tired. He had lost that polished arrogance, though traces still clung to the corners of his grin. Well, set you up in one of the glass rooms on the operations floor, he said. Just for now, temporarily, a glass cube. In the middle of the floor, not an office and exhibit, that was fine. I didn't need a door, I needed access. By 10:00 a.m., I had system credentials, again bare bones, limited, but enough to open the CRM and pull up the Liang account. No activity, no reply, no contact, just silence. I scrolled through old call notes. My notes. Every bullet point was a memory the time I corrected a mistranslation about energy subsidies in front of Mr. Liang, the lunch where I introduced him to our legal counsel in Mandarin, the message he once wrote by hand that simply read, "You listen. That's rare." Now the thread had been cut, and no one knew how to tie it back. Chase stopped by my cube in the afternoon. "How's everything going?" he asked, eyes flicking toward the screen behind me. "Fine," I replied. He cleared his throat. "Think we can restore the connection with Liang?" I turned slowly. "That depends?" "On what?" I met his eyes. "On whether they're willing to speak to you again." He blinked. "I mean, of course, I'll reach out. Maybe draft something." I nodded once. "They're not expecting slides." "Chase. They're expecting an apology." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Well, prepare a statement." "No," I said firmly. "Not a memo, not an email. They want to see it, face to face, in Mandarin." His smile faltered. "Mine, you're the one who removed me." I said, "You told them without saying a word that their trust didn't matter. That has a cost." He sighed, the weight of that reality beginning to settle. "Fine. I'll write something." I slid a small card across the table. "I'll translate it, but I'll lead the call. You don't speak unless you're spoken to." He opened his mouth to object, but stopped. Something shifted in his eyes' recognition. Maybe, or surrender. For the first time, he didn't argue. That night, I stayed late, alone in the glass cube. The office emptied around me, lights dimmed one section at a time, and I reviewed everything: emails, notes, Mandarin glossaries. I made a list of phrases to avoid, respectful terms to include, and questions to let them ask first. Not strategy, not PR, just respect. It was strange being back, familiar but not comfortable. I saw old faces pass my cube. Some smiled with relief, others with guilt. No one spoke, but that was fine. I didn't need them to say it. I felt it. I paused for a moment, staring out through the glass. Was I doing the right thing? A part of Mesmal but persistent wondered if I should have walked away for good. Let it all burn. Let them feel the absence fully. But I thought of the team in Shanghai, of Mr. Liang, of the quiet trust we had built not with policies, but presence. If I could restore even a sliver of that, it would be worth it. I wasn't here for Chase. I was here for the bridge. Friday arrived quiet and overcast, the kind of morning where even time feels hesitant, where footsteps echo just a little louder, and everyone speaks just a little softer, as if the air is listening. I was in early, 7:45 à them. My blazer hung neatly behind the door of my glass cube, and a single printed page sat on my desk, the final version of the apology. It wasn't long, no fluff, no defense, just humility, translated with care into formal Mandarin. At 9:20, Chase arrived. He looked tired, paler than usual, eyes lined with a grayness that didn't come from sleeplessness alone. He had a folder tucked under one arm and the apology draft in the other. When he saw me, he gave a weak half-smile, like a student hoping his last-minute homework might earn extra credit. "I've been practicing the pronunciation," he said, holding up a note card. I didn't return the smile. I simply reached over and slid the revised version of the apology toward him. He scanned it, eyes widening slightly at the intricate Mandarin characters. I don't know how to pronounce half of this." "Then don't," I said gently. "Let me speak." He hesitated. "I just thought it would look better coming from me." "Trust doesn't care how things look," I replied. "It cares how things feel. Let's not perform, let's apologize." He didn't argue. That, at least, showed growth. At 9:58 a.m., we entered the conference room, the same room where just 1 week earlier, Chase had watched his carefully curated pitch collapse in silence. He sat differently this time, straighter, more alert, but not arrogant. His posture was that of someone no longer pretending to be in control. The monitor flickered on, 10:00 a.m. Exactly. The Liang Group delegation appeared on screen, Mr. Liang at the center, flanked by two senior executives, their faces unreadable. I bowed my head slightly and spoke first. In Mandarin, "It is an honor to speak with you again. Thank you for joining us." Mr. Liang nodded but didn't respond. I continued slowly, deliberately. "We recognize the disruption that occurred during our last communication. I personally wish to express regret for the abrupt manner of my departure and for the lack of respect that followed." The room was still. On screen, one of the executives leaned forward slightly, watching me closely. Then Mr. Liang spoke. "This man," he said in Mandarin, nodding toward Chase without even turning, "is he the one who replaced you?" I didn't look at Chase. He made the decision. Yes. Does he understand what he removed? His tone was not harsh. It was clinical, evaluative, like a teacher asking a student why they failed an open book test. I chose my next words carefully. He is beginning to. There was a pause long enough to make Chase shift uncomfortably beside me. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the silence. Mr. Liang looked at me again. "Are you with this company now?" I paused, then said softly, "No. I am assisting temporarily, at their request." Another pause. Then he asked, "Would you consider representing us elsewhere? We are seeking partners who value not only contracts, but understanding." From the corner of my eye, I saw Chase stiffen. His breath caught, just slightly. I didn't respond immediately. I let the words settle like dust in the room. Then I answered, "That conversation is one I'd be honored to have, but not here. Not now." Mr. Liang inclined his head, a small and dignified gesture that signaled the end of the meeting. "We appreciate your words, Miss Foster, and your integrity." The screen went black. For several seconds, there was only the low hum of the monitor cooling itself down. Then Chase exhaled sharply. "What the hell was that?" he blurted. I remained still. "That," I said, "was the closest thing you'll get to forgiveness." His voice rose, brittle and panicked. "They offered you a job." In the middle of our meeting, in our boardroom, I turned to him. Calm, steady. "Your boardroom or your father's?" He blinked, caught. "I didn't accept anything." I said, "I honored your request. I gave you a second chance. And you're still blowing it." He stood, began pacing. "You can't just walk away from this and make me look like the idiot here." I stood too, collected my notes, and looked him in the eye. "I didn't make you look like anything. Chase, you did that all on your own." His voice cracked. "If my father hears about this, he already knows." I interrupted. He froze. I continued, evenly. "He called me Wednesday night, asked why our longest-standing client had gone silent. I told him the truth, that you fired the one person who knew how to hold it all together." Chase sat down again, slowly, like the weight of it all had just caught up to his body. "I was just trying to prove myself," he whispered. My expression softened, but not out of sympathy. Out of clarity. "You still can," I said, "but not by pretending you don't need people, not by firing the ones who do the work you haven't learned how to understand." He didn't answer. And I didn't stay. Back at my glass cube, I packed the few belongings I had brought back, one notebook, a pen, and the red tea tin. Mr. Liang gave me years ago. I placed it carefully in my bag. At 11:45 a.m., I sent an email to HR, subject conclusion of consultancy assignment body. "My work here is complete. Please consider this my final day. No bitterness, no drama, just truth." As I passed the front desk, the receptionist gave me a small nod of respect, the kind you don't earn with titles, only with consistency. Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight poured across the pavement, warm and sharp. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I walked to a quiet cafe on 8th Street, ordered jasmine tea, and sat by the window. I wasn't grieving. I was free. By Monday morning, the silence inside Valenbridge wasn't strategic anymore. It was collapse. Emails flew without context. Clients were asking questions no one wanted to answer. The Liang Group had gone dark, completely unresponsive. And now, two other Southeast Asian partners were reevaluating their alignment, which in corporate speak meant you're losing us too. The CFO had issued an emergency memo asking every department to freeze travel, pause hiring, and conduct a full audit of international accounts. And Chase was unraveling. The man who once strutted across the 17th floor like it was his runway now walked with slumped shoulders and a tablet clutched to his chest like a shield. His posture screamed one thing he knew: the board was watching. The foundation had cracked, and this time there was no pivot plan to cover the mess. I didn't respond to his messages, not because I was vindictive, because I was finished. On Tuesday afternoon, I received a message from Lawson & Reed Global Partners, one of the firms Valenbridge had once beat out in a bidding war for the Liang deal. Now, they were offering me lunch. By Wednesday, I had signed on. Senior advisor, global strategy, full autonomy, transparent salary, an office that overlooked the skyline, and, more importantly, respect that didn't require me to wear armor. My first meeting at Lawson & Reed took place that Friday, exactly 2 weeks after Chase fired me. The receptionist greeted me by name. I wore navy knot for symbolism, just comfort. There was no plaque waiting, no ceremony. But the air felt different, like I didn't need to explain my value. 10 surgers, sharp. I walked into the boardroom. Mr. Liang stood to greet me. He bowed slightly, his expression warm. "Miss Foster," he said, in English. "It is good to see you where you belong." We shook hands, no translator, no buffer, just clarity. The meeting lasted just under an hour. We reviewed new partnership terms, mapped out mutual goals, and outlined a strategy rooted in his words: continuity and care. At the end, as he stood to leave, he turned back. "Do they know what they lost?" he asked. I smiled gently. "They will, one contract at a time." Meanwhile, back at Valenbridge, the final act unfolded without me. The board had called an emergency session. Reports had surfaced about Chase's mishandling not just of the Liang partnership, but a series of strategic missteps that had compromised trust across multiple regions. A Japanese logistics firm had canceled a shipment mid-route. A Singaporean energy partner requested leadership reassignment as a condition of staying. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the headlines. That same week, Chase's father returned from his extended business trip. No press release, no internal memo. Just a closed-door board review and a photograph that reached me through quiet channels. Chase, exiting the building. A box in his arms. His tie slightly loosened. Eyes hollow. The golden boy had been handed a kingdom and treated it like a startup. And now, the sand had slipped through his fingers. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. Justice. Real justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in softly. Through competence, through consistency, through the unshakable clarity of someone who didn't need a title to prove their worth. On my third day at Lawson & Reed, I returned from lunch to find a single envelope on my desk. Inside, a handwritten note. "Your presence restored something. We build forward together." Liang, I placed it in my drawer, not for keepsakes, but for reminders. That trust is a currency, and I had earned it. Not loudly, not quickly, but fully. That weekend, the whispers began to circulate, not about me, but about them, that Valenbridge's Asia accounts were unstable, that the Liang Group had moved to a new advisory firm, that Elena Foster was no longer with Valenbridge, and that was the problem. I didn't correct the rumors. I didn't need to. By Monday, 3 voicemails waited from consulting firms. 2 LinkedIn messages from international boards, 1 formal inquiry from the World Trade Consortium, but the most telling sign: Chase's name disappeared from Valenbridge's website. No statement, no farewell, just gone. I never wanted revenge. I wanted recognition. But more than that, I wanted room to keep building, to do work that meant something, to walk into rooms where respect wasn't a performance, but a policy. Now, I had that. That evening, I sat at my desk, TA in hand, city lights outside, and reflected. I thought of the countless late nights I'd once spent translating not just language, but intention. I thought of the boardrooms where I had spoken only when spoken to. I thought of how they had fired me like a function, thinking a role could replace a relationship. But you can't replace what you don't understand. And now, they understood. Too late. They thought they were firing a title, but they were erasing a bridge. And when the dust settled, it wasn't the loudest voice that stayed standing. It was the one who had built trust all along in silence, in consistency, in care. Elena Foster didn't demand power. She didn't fight with noise. She simply reminded them gracefully, unforgettably, that competence is not optional and respect is not a perk. Let this be a reminder. Respect is not earned by lineage, but by presence. Partnerships are not built on titles, but on trust. And when you remove someone because they don't look the part, you're not streamlining, you're breaking the backbone. To everyone who's ever been underestimated, sidelined, or replaced by someone louder but not wiser, this story is for you. Not just to feel seen, but to remember your quiet strength holds more power than they realize. And if you felt something from Elena's story, if it made you reflect, made you proud, maybe even made you tear up a little, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel, because we're just getting started. Here, we tell stories that fight back with truth, that expose quiet injustice, that lift up the people who keep building even when no one's watching. Drop a comment and let us know. Have you ever been replaced, overlooked, or underestimated, only to prove exactly what they lost? Your voice matters. And we'll be right here, next time with another story that just might change the way you see the world. Until then, take care and stay powerful.